To tell us more about Rex Education and to officially open today's event, let us hear from Rex Education's Chief External Affairs Officer, Ms. Danda Cremelda I. Buhan.
Good afternoon, everyone, and we hope you are all safe inside your homes as we enter another challenging ECQ. Before we move on to today's exciting discussion and lecture, allow me to introduce to you the brand new Rex Education. A brand, a community, an advocacy, a tradition of service dedicated to inspiring every Filipino lifelong learner to advance themselves and uplift others. With 70 years of service and dedication to education, we have evolved from that iconic bookstore that we all know to something bigger and more significant. From just providing learners with published educational materials, we are now accompanying everyone throughout their lifelong journey, learning in all forms, beyond the walls of institutions, learning for delight, enlightenment, and fulfillment. And true to our tradition of service, Rex Education is guided by the Educampion philosophy, which seeks to rally and empower education duty bearers. We believe that all of us are Educampions, champions for education who are all working with the best interests of the Filipino whole learner in mind. As Rex Education, our mission is to empower all duty bearers in the field of education to champion education no matter what the circumstances are. It is through and because of this that we are excited to spend today with you as we come together to unveil our most updated offering for the Philippine legal community. Today, we are excited to launch the new and updated Taxation Law Reviewer, especially written for our hardworking and dedicated bar hopefuls this year. The book is not just limited to the discussion of the provisions of the law and the applicable jurisprudence from the doctrinal cases to the most recent ones. It also points out gray areas in taxation law, as well as court decisions that seem to be in conflict with one another. It also covers updated revenue regulations, revenue memorandum circulars, revenue memorandum orders, BIR rulings, Department of Finance issuances, Bureau of Local Government Finance issuances and opinions, and other relevant administrative issuances. Students will find that court decisions that are cited inside this reviewer are not just limited to the Supreme Court, but will also include those from the Court of Tax of Appeals and the U.S. Supreme Court whenever they are relevant. We are very honored to have with us today the great mind behind this very insightful read. He has been most gracious to share his time with us to talk about the book and give us a short lecture on taxation law. He's the former Vice President for Administration and Dean at St. Louis University School of Law. He is currently a National Bar Reviewer in Taxation and Commercial Laws and a partner at Oracion Barlis and Associates Law Office in Baguio City. Friends, join me in welcoming the author of Taxation Law Reviewer and our partner in championing legal education, Attorney Jason Barlis.
Thank you, Ms. Dada, and
you're welcome.
Thank you to Rex Bookstore. Before I proceed with my lecture, allow me to, of course, give thanks first to the management of Rex Bookstore, the editorial staff, most especially of Rex, for helping me out in this book. I would like to thank also friends who are here, mga paborito kong katrabaho sa Philippine Association of Law Schools, Dean Joanne Largo, Commissioner Jojo T. of the Legal Education Board, Judge Lilibeth Sindayen Libiran. Thank you for graciously accepting my invitation for you to be part of this book launch. It means a lot to me, and I will be forever grateful for that. Of course, to all those who have been very supportive in this endeavor, my entire family, my family in the School of Law, headed, of course, by Dean Christine Elvenia. Her inputs, her suggestions, and comments had been invaluable in improving and in coming up with the final version of this book. So thank you, Dean. Of course, also to all my colleagues and students at the St. Louis University School of Law. Likewise to my previous reviewees at the Albano Bar Review Center, as well as the Chan Robles Internet Bar Review, who have in one way or the other helped informing my mind concerning taxation law. Likewise, my family here at the Oracion Barlis and Associates Law Office, and all the attendees for this particular forum, maraming salamat sa inyo. Allow me to share some matters in connection with this taxation law reviewer. Well, of course, considering the time that we have, I will not be able to go through all of the important items that you will find in this particular book. But I hope to give you a good glimpse of the things that would make you more or less desire to be engaged in taxation law. Some have asked me, why write about taxation law? It's perceived to be one of the technical areas of law. It's highly dynamic. The rules keep on changing. So why write about it? Well, to me, that's precisely the answer to the question. It's dynamic and therefore interesting. Okay? It's technical to some extent, but in the years that I had been involved in teaching and in the practice of tax law, I have come to learn that there is a way by which we can simplify the approach to taxation. It need not be something that is so complicated as some would tell it or perceive it to be. There is a way by which we can make it interesting and we can make it easy to understand. Okay? In this particular book, it's divided into 9 chapters. Okay? And it covers the areas that you have to know for purposes of preparing for the bar examinations. But do not be mistaken, because it's not just limited only to those who are preparing for the bar examinations. In the years of my law practice, I had difficulty in finding a textbook that would address some issues in taxation. And that is one of the things that I had in mind in coming up with this book. Okay, so that those who are engaged in the practice of tax may also refer to this particular book and hopefully find some solutions to the problems that they have in connection with this area of law. Okay. The chapters, as I've mentioned, are covering the various areas in the bar examination. So we start with general principles, followed by income taxation, and thereafter estate tax, donors tax, value-added tax, other internal revenue taxes like percentage tax, documentary stamps tax, excise tax. And then we jump into the discussion of tax administration, internal revenue, tax remedies, as well as the Court of Tax Appeals. And then a discussion on local taxation as well as real property taxation. Now, for those who are preparing for the bar, well, for the past years, for the recent years, I have noticed that there are more and more questions coming from local and real property taxation. And that's why please do not forget this area of law. Some would want to concentrate on the other fields of tax law, but very recently there had been more questions coming from this. So it's time that we also pay attention to local and real property taxation. Now, considering the vast areas that we have to, that the book covers, as I've said, it would be impossible for us to even tackle majority of the items here. That's why we will just be taking a look at some of the notable items in this particular book. The reviewer is presented in a Q&A format. Why Q&A? Because it's easier for us to get a grasp of the law if it's in this particular format. Now, for those who are preparing for the bar examinations, it's also relatively easier for you to use it because a Q&A format can also be a validation of what you have already learned in law school. Okay? For those who are learning taxation law at the very first instance, the Q&A format can also come handy because it's easier for you to know, considering that the approach, the attack to the question is direct. Okay. It's also important to note that it is in accordance with the syllabus of the Supreme Court. Okay. Notably, the 2020-21 bar syllabus was ensured in the writing of this particular reviewer. But note please that I did not just limit myself to the 2020-2021 syllabus. I took a look at the previous syllabi of the Supreme Court and then take some topics that were included in the previous syllabi, even if they are not included in the 2020 syllabus. The reason is that, of course, we do not know what would be the mindset of the next chairman of the bar examinations. They might get from previous topics in the syllabi, and that's why I've decided to include those areas. Okay. One thing that I am actually I'm really proud of this in the reviewer is that it is, to my perception, complete and concise. Okay, why do I say that? It's because the things that I have perceived to be needed for purposes of preparing for the bar examination, considering that I had been teaching this for several years, to my mind are there in the reviewer, and considering the comprehensive nature of the discussions as well as the coverage, I think it's more or less complete in itself. Of course, I did not include anymore a discussion of the Tariff and Customs Code in the reviewer, considering that it has been recently removed from the coverage of the bar examination for the past several years. And I don't think that it will be included again in future examinations. So I completely discarded discussions about the Tariff and Customs Code. Now, let's go through some of the characteristics of the book. So what we will do is we will see the various chapters and identify characteristics of the book, which you can actually identify with respect to all the chapters. So ang mangyayari, no, even if I would be discussing this, for example, in a particular chapter, this is actually applicable to all the chapters in the book. I just took a look at some for purposes of presenting at least a sample of how the book feels and how it looks like for your appreciation. Okay. Now, as I've mentioned earlier, Chapter 1 deals with principles of taxation, general principles of taxation. Now, in the book, you will notice that the discussions are actually starting from the most basic discussions. Okay? although it is a reviewer, and therefore I could already more or less make that assumption that the user has some background in this field of law, that was really a tempting assumption to make. But I have decided not to fall to that temptation. Bakit? Kasi, well, it's not probably good for me to assume that the readers already have knowledge about this particular field of law. And that's why I decided to make the discussion start from the most basic, and then it slowly progresses towards the more complex issues. Okay? So ganun ang atake. That's why even if you're using this for the first time, and even if you're a first-time learner of taxation law, this book can actually help you in appreciating tax law. Okay? So, ayan, paunti-unti yan, slowly progressing yan from basic to complex. Just like, for example, what we have here in our situation presented here. First question is, what is taxation? The most basic question to ask in every taxation discussion or in every tax book. What's taxation? So we start from the most basic. Now, if you will note also another example of how basic the approach is, there are certain items of distinction where the presentation is in tabular form, like in this particular instance, distinction between tax and license fees. Okay, you already have there the points of distinction for both tax and license fees. So if you're a reader, it's easier for you to be able to understand and retain the distinction between tax and license fee, considering that it is already presented in this particular format. So that's how friendly it is. But it's not, of course, wise to just be contented with that distinction. We have to know the reason why is there a need for us to have that distinction. So for example, in this item in the book, it was asked, why is it important to determine if the exaction is a regulatory fee or a tax? Okay? It's important to determine if it's a regulatory fee or a tax because there are certain parameters that are applicable only to taxes that may not be applicable to regulatory tax or a license fee. Okay? For instance, a license fee, the amount of which should be just commensurate to the cost of regulation. Okay. On the other hand, if it's a tax measure, then it's not limited only to the cost of regulation. Okay. So it's important for you to know this distinction. Again, the idea here is be able to retain the points for distinction, know the distinction, but then the most important thing of all, after knowing the points for distinction, is how to apply them. Diba? Kasi useless even if you know the points for distinction, even if you memorize all of those, if there will be no application, and it's practically useless. You're just memorizing. Okay, that's why the book will point to you applications concerning this distinction. For example, in what we have here, the case of Angeles University Foundation versus Angeles City, where Angeles University Foundation is applying for a building permit fee. It applied for a building permit fee, but it wanted to be free from the building permit fee. On what ground? On the ground that it is a non-stock, non-profit educational institution. Okay? We know that non-stock, non-profit educational institutions are exempt from taxes. And that's the reason why Angeles University Foundation was asking for the exemption from the building permit fee, because it was exempt from payment of taxes. So the question is Angeles University Foundation exempt from the payment of the building permit fee? And the court said that Angeles University is not exempt from the payment of building permit fees. While it's true that non-stock non-profit educational institutions are exempt from payment of certain taxes, this exemption does not apply to exactions which are regulatory in nature. Okay? So, that's the application that we were pointing out earlier. Okay? It's important to know if the exaction is a fee or a tax. Because if you are a tax-exempt person, you're exempt from taxes. But you may not necessarily be exempted from payment of certain fees, such as in this particular case, the building permit fee, which is a regulatory imposition, considering that the amount being collected is just for the purpose of the reasonable cost of inspection. Okay? That's how the book works. No? So it ties up several things from the basic ones up to the time that you apply them in actual situations. So this is spread all throughout the various chapters of the book. Okay. We take a look at some items in chapter 2, which is income taxation. If I'm not mistaken, this is the longest chapter in the entire book. Okay, and expectedly at that, because it's really a long area of taxation law. It's relatively technical in some of the approach. That's why it would take quite a lengthy discussion for purposes of coming up with something that will explain to the reader the gamut of income taxation. So if you will notice, again, it starts from basic concepts. First question being asked is, what's income? The most basic question in income taxation. What's income? Flow of wealth other than a mere return of capital. And then the book goes into the discussion of illustrating how to know if there is income or not. Okay? Maraming mga ano dyan, maraming mga examples dyan, just for the purpose of determining whether there is an income or not. Okay? Now, as I've said, discussions can progress from basic to complex issues. In the problem presented here, question is, are gains from the sale of bonds, debentures, and other certificates of indebtedness taxable? Okay. We have a codal answer, the answer that is found in the tax code itself. Gains realized from the sale or exchange or retirement of bonds, debentures, and other certificates of indebtedness are taxable. However, gains realized from the sale or exchange or retirement of bonds, debentures, and other certificate of indebtedness with a maturity of more than 5 years shall be excluded from gross income and therefore exempt. That's a codal answer. Okay? Again, some examinees would have the tendency of memorizing the answer. No problem with that. Okay, no problem with that. But my concern is, if that's the approach that we have to take, then probably tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, we might forget about those things that we have memorized. That's why in the book, it presents to you illustrations so that you will know what is the details, what are the details of these matters being asked and being presented in the discussion. So the complex issues here are presented with some notes that I have decided to insert. Take a look at this. This is a sample. No? The book contains a lot of author's notes, it's easy for you to distinguish them because we have decided to indicate that this is not really part of the answer, but it's just there presented for purposes of the reader being able to understand fully, having a grasp of the details of the item that was asked. Okay? Naka-italicize yung mga notes na yan. Talagang makikita nyo na explanatory notes yung mga yan. No? So for instance, in this particular explanatory note, you will see here an illustration of how the capital market works for you to know and appreciate the issue concerning gains from trading or redemption or retirement of long-term securities. You have to know, or at least you have to have an idea of how securities work. Okay? And for you to know how securities work, then you must have at least some working knowledge of the capital market. That's why I've decided to include in the discussion explanatory notes concerning capital markets, explaining the concept behind primary market and secondary market transactions. Again, all designed for purposes of helping the reader understand the details of the items being asked. Okay. Ito pa. No? Question is, what is the tax implication of a sale of real property classified as capital asset? Again, easy answer is the one that is provided by the tax code. A sale of a real property classified as capital asset is subject to capital gains tax of 6%. That's the easy answer, and that's a codal answer. Most students, most examinees will stop there. Is there a problem with that? If you stop there, then you do not recognize the difference in the tax approaches concerning different kinds of income taxpayers. That's why the book will present to you clarifications concerning income tax rules per taxpayer. For example, in this item that we have here, you have to distinguish between the tax approach concerning sale of real property classified as capital asset by individuals versus that of corporations, domestic corporations. Okay? Why? Because if it's a sale of a real property classified as capital asset by an individual, then true, it is subject to the 6% capital gains tax. But if the taxpayer were a domestic corporation, then only the gain from the sale of lands or buildings shall be subject to the capital gains tax. Lands or buildings. Anong ibig sabihin? Ang ibig sabihin nito, if the real property involves equipment or machinery, kung ang nagbebenta ng equipment o machinery individual, then there will still be liability for the 6% capital gains tax. But if the person selling the machinery or the equipment is a domestic corporation, then that sale will not be subject to capital gains tax because the tax code is clear. Concerning domestic corporations, you apply the 6% capital gains tax on the sale, exchange, or disposition of lands or buildings. Okay? Mahalagang distinction yan. And that is one of the items that you will see in the book. No? Clarifications concerning income tax rules per taxpayer. For those who are preparing for the bar, of course, I would like you to take note of this particular case. I believe that it was penned by Justice Leonin. So might as well take a look at this particular case. Okay. Another item which is of importance, in the book, whenever it's applicable, the discussions are not limited only to those that are involved in that particular chapter. For example, in this particular problem that we have, which is a previous bar exam question, 2019 bar, it's presented in the topic on income taxation because mainly it involves an income tax issue. But as you will notice later on, the book presents itself in a manner by which it's not just confined to what's being asked. Okay? Why? Because examiners might tend to twist the problem and ask you for other tax consequences. And therefore, you will be prepared in the event that happens. Just like this problem that we have here. Let's take a look at this. Okay? B transferred his ownership over a 1,000 square meter commercial land and 3-door apartment to ABC Corporation, a family corporation of which B is a stockholder. The transfer was in exchange of 10,000 shares of stocks of ABC Corporation. So, from that particular point alone, you know that the trend of the problem is dealing towards properties in exchange for shares. Okay, a 1,000 square meter land, okay, 1,000 square meter commercial land and 3-door apartment being exchanged for 10,000 shares of a corporation. As a result, B, the transferor, acquired 51% of ABC Corporation with all the shares of stock having the right to vote. Okay, what happened? B paid no tax on the exchange, maintaining that it is a tax avoidance scheme allowed under the law. The BIR, on the other hand, insisted that B's scheme amounted to tax evasion. Should B pay taxes on the exchange? Explain. So that's the question presented in the bar. Of course, expect the answer that is supported by the provisions of our tax code. Okay? Answer: B should not pay taxes because the exchange is tax-free and is a form of tax avoidance. So B is correct in claiming that it is a tax avoidance scheme. Under the tax code, when a property is exchanged for shares of stocks and as a result of such transfer, said person alone or together with others not exceeding 4 persons gains control of the corporation, the transfer qualifies as a tax-free exchange, etc. Okay. Again, that answer is supported by provisions of law. So you have the ultimate answer, which is B should not pay taxes because it is a tax avoidance scheme. The legal basis of the answer, okay, provision of the tax code. And then the application. In this case, the land and apartment were exchanged for shares of stocks and B obtained control over the transferee corporation. Therefore, the transfer will not result to any taxable gain or loss. The transfer is a tax avoidance scheme. That's how the answer was presented, the answer to the bar examination. Okay, if you will notice, it follows the suggested format of answering bar examination questions. Okay, so yung ultimate answer is the beginning answer. You have the legal basis of the answer, the application of the law to the facts of the problem, and your conclusion. Okay, which is the time-tested formula in answering bar examination questions. The book presents answers in that particular format most of the time, but this is what I would want you to zero in this discussion. The explanatory note would tell you that in a tax-free exchange, aside from freedom from income tax and value-added tax, the transfer is also free from documentary stamp tax. So, kahit ang tanong sa bar deals only with income tax, okay, the book presents to you already, what about the other tax consequences like VAT? Nandyan na. It's also VAT-free. What about the other tax consequence such as documentary stamp tax? Nandiyan na rin. It's free also from documentary stamp tax. And if you will notice, the discussions in the book would also point to you the exact provision of law or the regulation or a Supreme Court decision so that you will know that I am not inventing the discussions. It has a legal basis. Okay? Yan. So whenever it's applicable, the discussions would interrelate various provisions of law and various taxes. Okay? That is how the questions are answered. Now, another notable thing that we have to consider for income tax purposes is the inclusion of the train law. During the recent years, the train law and the create law are the two laws that drastically changed our tax code. Okay? The train law discussions were already included in this particular book. And it's not just about the provisions of the law. Applicable regulations are also presented there. Okay? For instance, let's take a look at this particular problem. QQ earned annual compensation in 2020 amounting to 2 million pesos. Aside from employment income, he owns a convenience store with gross sales of 2.5 million pesos. Is QQ allowed to avail himself of the 8% income tax? How will QQ's tax liability be determined? That's the question. The 8% income tax, of course, was introduced to us in the provisions of the train law. Okay? The 8% income tax will be in lieu of the graduated tax rates found in the tax code, okay, as amended by the train law. And it is also in lieu of the percentage tax. So aside from the graduated income tax, okay, the 8% tax will already include with it the liability for percentage tax. So hindi mo na kailangan bayaran yon. No? So the question here is QQ allowed to avail himself of the 8% income tax, and how would it be determined? Okay? The suggested answer to this problem is QQ is allowed to avail himself of the 8% income tax concerning his income from the convenience store, which is the income from business, where you can invoke the 8% income tax. Okay? Although QQ earned income from mixed sources, to qualify for the 8% income tax, his gross sales from business should not exceed the VAT threshold of 3 million. So for a person to become or to be able to claim entitlement to the 8% income tax, of course, the 3 million VAT threshold for a person to become liable for VAT should not be breached. And that is what is presented in the problem. Considering that the gross sales is only 2.5 million pesos, gross sales from business, 2.5 million pesos, it did not breach the 3 million threshold. Okay? Therefore, this particular person is entitled to avail himself of the 8% tax. Now, the fact that the combined income from business and from employment would go beyond 3 million is of no moment because the 3 million threshold is tested against the gross sales or gross receipts from business. Okay? Now, going back to the question, how do you determine the income? To determine QQ's income tax liability, his compensation income will be subject to the graduated income tax rates. Why? Because the 8% income tax is applicable only to the income tax, to the income arising from trade, business, or the practice of profession. But with respect to compensation income, one cannot avail himself of the 8% income tax concerning compensation income. Okay? So, As to his business income, if QQ chose to be taxed using the 8% income tax, his tax base shall be the entire 2.5 million. Now, this is important to consider because in the 8% income tax approach, ordinarily, a person can claim that the first 250,000 should be removed from the tax base. And that's correct because that's the provision of the trade law. But in our problem, we did not do that. We did not remove the 250,000. Why did we not remove the 250,000? Because take note that this taxpayer will involve earned income from two sources, compensation and business. Yung 250,000 niya, that is already considered for purposes of determining the income tax liability concerning compensation. Okay? So tatanggalin na yan dyan. Kaya yung business income niya will remain intact at 2.5 million. Hindi mo na aalisin yung 250,000. Now, just to clarify, kung wala sana yung kanyang compensation income, then the tax base will not be the 2.5 million income from business. Why? Because there will still be a 250,000 that will be removed from that particular tax base. Okay? Pero dito ang nangyari, combined income siya, mixed income earner. Okay? So the 250,000 will be considered for purposes of determining the tax for the compensation income, while the 2.5 million will remain intact for purposes of determining the 8% income tax liability. And take note that in the payment of the 8% income tax, QQ will no longer be required to pay the 3% percentage tax for his gross receipt from business. So, ito, illustrative example lang. No? In the book, you will see a lot of variations regarding this. Okay? Merong purely compensation income earner, merong purely business income earner, okay? Merong business income earner with gross sales of more than 3 million, merong business income earner with gross sales of more than 3 million, but a part of that is VAT exempt. So you will see a lot of variations regarding this particular problem. Para ang idea, kahit anong itanong sa inyo, you will be prepared. Okay? You will be prepared for whatever variations may be asked by your examiner. Okay? I mentioned earlier about the create law. Sabi ko kanina, no? Most important pieces of legislation during the recent years when it comes to tax, train, create. Okay? The book already presents a discussion of the create law. Now, for those who are preparing for the 2020-2021 bar, I know that the create law is not yet included in the coverage of your exam. Okay? That's why, so that the discussion based on the original provisions of the NIRC, and then there is an explanatory note concerning the application of the CREATE Act. Okay? Example is this. What's the tax implication of the corporation? Okay? 30% of the taxable income. That is applying the provisions of the NIRC, Republic Act 8424. But then, because of the amendments introduced by the CREATE law, this has been changed already. That's why there is an explanatory note that is presented there, okay, where you see that under the CREATE Act, there is a two-tiered approach to income taxation. That beginning July 1, 2020, okay, corporation shall have a tax rate of 25% of its taxable income. from the previous 30%. Okay, except for domestic corporations with taxable income not exceeding 5 million and with total assets of not exceeding 100 million, excluding the land and the building on which it is situated, okay, where the tax shall be reduced to only 20% of the taxable income. Okay. The idea here is, yun nga, forward-looking tayo, no? After the 2020-2021 bar, I think it's rather expected that the CREATE law will already be included in the coverage. That's why, since this book is not just limited for the 2020-2021 bar, might as well present the approach by reason of the application of the CREATE law. Okay. Now, on chapter 3, which is estate taxation, discussions, again, this is applicable to all chapters of the book, no? Discussions are augmented by applicable revenue regulations. So it's not just limited, as I've said, to the provisions of the law. Whenever it can be augmented by regulations, the regulations are cited in the book. For example, this particular question: may banks allow partial withdrawal from an account left behind by a deceased depositor? The answer is yes. If a bank has knowledge of the death of a person who has maintained a deposit, whether alone or jointly with another, okay, it shall allow the withdrawal subject to the following. Take note of the requirements: a final withholding tax of 6% of the amount to be withdrawn, and the withdrawal should be made within 1 year from the date of the death of the decedent. Okay? So, ito, codal provision yan. No? Codal provision yan. The bank can allow withdrawal provided that there is a final withholding tax, okay, of 6%. The withdrawal is made within 1 year. Okay? 1 year from the death. Okay yan, kasi nasa tax code yan. But, as I've said, it's augmented by provisions of regulations. So in the note, right, it mentions there that in instances where the bank deposits have been duly included in the gross estate of the decedent and the estate tax due had been paid, the executor, administrator, or any of the legal heirs shall present the electronic certificate authorizing registration that's issued for the estate, okay, prior to withdrawing from the bank deposit account. Such withdrawal shall no longer be subject to the 6% final withholding tax. That is not found in the provisions of the code. But you see that in the provisions of Revenue Regulations 12-18. So, since it is helpful in fully appreciating this particular issue, okay, that regulation has been included in the discussion. Again, as I've said, you will see that as prevalent in all the chapters of the book. Okay. A question on donor's tax in chapter 4. What I would want you to consider here is that certain bar examinations have been presented, of course, with suggested answers, okay, with the applicable provisions of law. But in some instances, okay, with certain notes, so that, again, the discussion shall be clarified. For example, in this particular 2019 bar problem, by the way, in the book, you will see there bar questions for the past 5 years. I think almost all of the bar questions for the past 5 years are there. But the inclusion of the bar exam questions is not limited only to the past 5 years. It spreads across several years. Meron pang mga inclusion dyan ng mga 1990s bar question which are still relevant up to this time. There are also questions there that are circa 2000 onwards but are still relevant as of this time. Tinanong pa rin yan, no, for as long as they are still relevant. But the bar questions for the past 5 years definitely included in the discussions, such as in this particular problem. Item in donor's tax. Due to rising liquidity problems and pressure from its concerned suppliers, P Corporation instituted a flash auction sale of its shares of stocks. P Corporation was then able to sell its treasury shares to Z Incorporated, an unrelated corporation, for 1 million, which was only a little below the valuation of P Corporation shares based on its latest audited financial statements. In connection therewith, P Corporation sought a BIR ruling to confirm that, notwithstanding the price difference of the selling price and their book value, the said transaction falls under one of the recognized exemptions to donor's tax under the tax code. The question is, does the above transaction fall under any of the exemptions? Explain. Okay. You have here the suggested answer. Suggested answer is that the transaction does not fall under the list of exemptions under the tax code, but notwithstanding so, the transaction remains to be not subject to donor's tax. And then you have here the reasoning. No, you have here the reasoning. A reasoning founded on Revenue Memorandum Circular that explains the provisions of the train law. Okay, circular states that starting January 1, 2018, when shares of stocks not traded in the stock exchange are sold for less than its fair market value, the excess of the fair market value over the selling price shall be treated as a gift. No, as a gift, except when it is sold at an arm's length, free from any donative intent. Except when it is sold at an arm's length, free from any donative intent. And therefore, it is incumbent upon the taxpayer to prove that it falls under the exceptional situations. And then you have there a discussion justifying why it falls under the exceptional situation. In the present case, the following facts show that the transaction was at an arm's length and free from any donative intent. These are, the sale was to address P's rising liquidity problems. The sale was made through an auction sale and in favor of an unrelated party, and there is no substantial insufficiency in the consideration. Okay, so those are circumstances that would tell you that it is a transaction at an arm's length. Now, ganito ang problema. Of course, I recognize that some are aware of the ruling of the Supreme Court in Philippine American Life General Insurance Company versus Secretary of Finance. In this case of Paljic versus Secretary of Finance, where the facts are almost similar to what has been presented in the bar problem. Okay? In this particular case, the court said that there was liability for donor's tax. Now, why is it that in the book, it did not apply that particular ruling? Okay? There is an explanatory discussion why the book does not apply the ruling. In the bar problem, the sale was to address the corporation's rising liquidity problems. In Paljic, it was merely to divest the ownership in a subsidiary corporation. Okay? In the bar problem, the sale was for a little below the valuation of the shares. In Paljic, right, there was no mention about how much insufficiency there was, but the court observed that there is a difference between the book value and the selling price, which became the basis for the donor's tax. And then, Paljic was decided prior to the amendment of Section 100 by the train law. That's why, based on all these circumstances, I submit that this is different from the case of Paljic. So, you will see here a discussion, no? why there is a departure from a previous case that apparently looks the same, and then there is a justification, no, why that particular case was not used. Okay? Now, you will also find here in this book updated jurisprudence, and this I can guarantee that the jurisprudence is really updated. Okay, the cases decided in 2020 are included in the book. Sayang lang yung mga 2021 hindi na naihabol, no? Pero yung mga cases ng 2020 kasama yan. Updated jurisprudence. Example is this 2017 case of Medicard, which is a health maintenance organization. It's a question on value-added tax, by the way, which is chapter 5 of the book. Okay. Medicard, health maintenance organization, individuals enrolled in the healthcare programs would pay an annual membership fee. Okay, or in exchange, there will be various preventive, diagnostic, and curative medical services by duly licensed physician, specialist, professional staff. Okay, owned or operated by or accredited by Medicard. Now, upon receipt of the annual membership fee, Medicard already earmarks 80%, take note, 80% of the fees for medical utilization of its members. So pag natanggap, 80% automatically allocated for medical utilization of its members. Medicard issues a non-VAT receipt for that 80%. The remaining 20% is treated by Medicard as its service fee for which a VAT receipt is issued. Bottom line of the question, tama ba ang ginagawa ni Medicard? No? Ang sabi ng BIR, hindi dapat. Dapat yung entire receipt subject to VAT. 100% yan, subject to VAT. Medicare said, no, because 80% goes to medical utilization of its members. 20% lang napupunta sa amin. So 20% lang ang VATable. Okay? Was answered by the Supreme Court, the position taken by the BIR is incorrect. Okay? Why? Congress limited the scope, Section 108 of the Tax Code. Congress limited the scope of the term gross receipts for VAT purposes only to the amount that the taxpayer received for services it performed. Okay? Amounts held or received in trust, such as in this case where 80% goes to healthcare providers, okay, they do not form part of the amount or the receipt that is subject to VAT. Okay? Therefore, Medicard is correct that only 20% of what has been received should be subject to value-added tax. Again, recent jurisprudence incorporated in the book. Okay. Another area of note that you will find in the discussions, I think Ms. Dada has discussed earlier that certain gray areas are presented in the book with proposals on how to resolve these gray areas. And this is one thing that is present in the book. Okay? Discussion of various schools of thought concerning gray areas of the tax code. Okay. Why? Because it's expected that there are really some areas of law where the opinion will be divergent. And that's why there are various suggested answers that may be presented. These are covered in the different discussions in the book. Okay? Let me show you an illustration. The question is, what's the period to file a claim for refund of an unutilized input tax credit? Okay? Again, you have a codal answer. The one that's found in the tax code, Section 112A of the NIRC, okay, that provides that any VAT registered person whose sales are zero rated or effectively zero rated may, within 2 years after the close of the taxable quarter when the sales were made, apply for the issuance of a tax credit certificate. So ang dali ng tanong, no? What is the period to file a claim for refund of an unutilized input tax credit? It asks for a period. And the law provides the answer, 2 years after the close of the taxable quarter when the sales were made. Again, kung ikaw yung tipong mag-memorize, okay, madali, ma-memorize mo yan. No? But the thing is, when it comes to application, you will see some problems. For instance, ganito, no, para mas ma-appreciate natin. Let's say that A sells goods to B. A sells goods to B, shifts the burden of the value-added tax to B. So si B, binayaran niya selling price plus yung VAT. No? What happened? B exported those goods. Okay? B exported those goods. Because B made an export sale under the tax code, the export sale made by B is zero rated. It's subject to VAT at a rate of 0%. Okay? It's subject to VAT at a rate of 0%. So, what's the relevance of that? The relevance of that is because B made a zero-rated sale and B shouldered the burden of the value-added tax when the goods were sold by A, anong gagawin ni B sa value-added tax na yon? B can actually file a claim for refund. And that's the question now. What's the period to file a claim for refund? Ang sabi ng batas, madali. 2 years after the close of the quarter when the sale was made. But my question is, what do you mean by sale? What do you mean by the sale? Is it the sale made by A to B? Or the sale made by B, which is the export sale? What is the sale that's being referred to in the law? And that is what is presented in the book as having various schools of thought. The first school of thought, the relevant sale being referred in Section 112 is the sale that gave the taxpayer the entitlement to the refund. So in our problem, it is the export sale, which is the zero-rated sale. Okay? Yun ang reference point ng 2 years. The export sale. Second school of thought. The sale being referred to in Section 112 is the sale to the taxpayer, meaning the purchase from whence the input tax arose. In our problem, it is the sale made by A to B. That's the sale. That's the reference point. Okay? Mahalaga yan kasi nga, pag sumobra ka doon sa 2 years, expired yung refund mo. No? So, which is which now? Is it the sale made by A to B, such as in the second school of thought? Or the sale made by B, which is the export sale, which is the first school of thought? Okay? Those are presented in the book. Eh syempre, hindi naman kayo iiwan na hangin lang. There is a proposed resolution. Ito naman, proposed resolution with justification. You are free to formulate your own resolution, but the proposed resolution is presented in the book. Okay? The author submits that the first school of thought is the better argument, applying the ruling in CIR versus Chevron Holdings, which is a 2020 case. The law allows the taxpayer to file an administrative claim for refund with the BIR within 2 years after the close of the taxable quarter when the purchase was made. So parang yung second school of thought, when the purchase was made for the input tax paid on capital goods, or after the close of the taxable quarter when the zero-rated or effectively zero-rated sale was made for input tax attributed to zero-rated sale. In our problem, it is an export sale. It is not referring to input tax on capital goods. Export sale ito. That's why the suggestion is you apply the first school of thought, being the relevant sale, the sale which is zero rated or effectively zero rated. So ganun ang presentation, no? Merong mga conflicting thoughts and then a proposal on how to resolve them. Okay. As I've said earlier, the book discusses a lot concerning the provisions of the train law. I mentioned that in income tax, but you will notice that even in other areas of taxation, no, in other internal revenue taxes, the train law has an effect. And that's also covered by the book. For example, the effect of the train law on documentary stamp tax. Okay? Question is, are donations subject to documentary stamp tax? Yes, the train law amending section 196 of the NIRC now imposes documentary stamp tax on donation. That's important because prior to the train law, there was no doc stamp on documentary stamp tax on donation. But with the amendment of the introduced by the train law, we now have a documentary stamp tax on donation. But you see, ito importante ito, no, for those who are preparing for the bar. Paano kung extrajudicial settlement of estate? Hindi donation, pero extrajudicial settlement of estate. Is an extrajudicial settlement of estate subject to documentary stamp tax? Again, that's also presented in the book. And the answer is no, it is not subject to documentary stamp tax. It is not among those amendments that were affected by the train law. So there is still no documentary stamp tax concerning the execution of a deed of extrajudicial settlement of estate. Okay. On the discussion of internal revenue tax remedies, ito pinagsama-sama ko yung tax administration, internal revenue tax remedies, and the Court of Tax Appeals. I believe that they are interrelated. That's why they are lumped into a single chapter. And for those who are practicing tax law, I can proudly say that the book incorporates a lot of items which are usable to those who are practicing tax. Okay? Kasi isa yan sa hinahanap ko noon, no? Pag may mga problems sa law office, I look for reference materials. Of course, sometimes I find them, sometimes I do not find them. But the idea behind the book is to address the needs also of those who are in the practice of tax law. That's why relevant administrative issuances are discussed in the book. For example, the problem that we have here. How does one seek a review by the Secretary of Finance of the CIR's interpretation of tax laws? One of the powers of the Commissioner of Internal Revenue is to interpret tax laws. Nasa tax code yan, no? Section 4 ng tax code. The Commissioner of Internal Revenue can interpret tax laws. And if the taxpayer disagrees with the interpretation of a tax law by the Commissioner, the tax code presents a solution. It is subject to appeal or review by the Secretary of Finance. No? It's subject to review by the Secretary of Finance. But what the tax code does not provide is how do you do that? How do you appeal from the Commissioner to the Secretary of Finance? Wala na, missing na sa tax code yan. And dahil missing sa tax code yan, the solution is to look for administrative issuances, such as in this particular problem. Okay? So when the taxpayer disagrees with the ruling of the CIR, or his duly authorized representative, the taxpayer may, within 30 days, seek its review by the Secretary of Finance under a, using the requirements found in DO number 7-02. So you will see, if you're a practicing lawyer, no, practicing tax, you see here a solution for you. How do I appeal from the CIR to the Secretary? Nandito ang solution. Okay? But then, of course, you should not be contented with that. Okay? There must be a follow-through of the discussion because your next question would be, what if I lose at the Secretary of Finance level? No? So yan ang tanong. Under Section 4 of the NIRC, the CIR has the power to interpret tax laws subject to review by the Secretary of Finance. Where does one seek recourse from the adverse ruling of the Secretary of Finance? Again, sabi sa tax code, okay, subject to review by the Secretary of Finance, the interpretation made by the CIR. Okay? But after the Secretary of Finance, missing ulit ang tax code. Wala nang nakalagay sa tax code. So anong mangyayari? Follow through of the discussion. It's not found in the tax code. It's not found in regulations, but you see this in a decision of the Supreme Court, yung Paljic versus Secretary of Finance, where the court said that from the Secretary of Finance, you go next to the Court of Tax Appeals. Okay? You go to the Court of Tax Appeals. This falls under the other matters that may be taken cognizance of by the Court of Tax Appeals. Okay? Dati kasi nalilito pa, saan ba? From Secretary of Finance, ang kaakyat, Office of the President, Court of Appeals, Court of Tax Appeals. Ito na ang solution provided by the court itself. Okay? CTA. Okay. You also find updated revenue regulations in the discussion. For instance, the procedure governing assessment and due process requirement in the issuance of deficiency tax assessment. Okay? The old procedure as found in Revenue Regulations 12-99 is when the taxpayer is subject of an audit, no? Tapos nakita ng BIR that there is a need to assess the taxpayer will not be immediately assessed. Instead, the BIR must go through certain processes. Dati ang proseso, Notice of Informal Conference, NIC, Preliminary Assessment Notice, PAN, and then the assessment notice, formal assessment notice, formal demand to pay. Okay? That's the procedure in the past. But with recent regulations, the notice of informal conference, and in its stead is a notice of discrepancy. Notice of discrepancy. So makikita natin yan sa libro, no? A reference to Revenue Regulations 22-2020. Last year lang na issue. Okay? Included in the discussions. You also find there clearer discussion of the various remedies that's available to taxpayers. I chose this because it's I think it's an interesting and possible area of problem in the bar. Okay? Ganito ang background, no? Ganito ang background. A taxpayer was issued an assessment. The taxpayer does not agree with the assessment. So the remedy of the taxpayer, protest. Okay? Alam natin ang mga options, posibleng ganito. If you file a protest, and your protest was decided upon by the CIR, Commissioner of Internal Revenue, and your protest was denied, then your remedy is to appeal to the CTA. Okay yan, no? The other possibility is the Commissioner of Internal Revenue does not act within 180 days, which is the period for the Commissioner to act on a protest. If the Commissioner does not act within 180 days, you can treat that as an implied denial as a taxpayer appeal to the CTA. Okay din yan. Possible remedy yan. Ang problema ganito, sa totoong buhay, minsan hindi si Commissioner ang nagde-decide. Minsan ang nangyayari, si regional director ang nagde-decide niyan, no? When you protest to the commissioner, you protest to the commissioner through the regional director because the regional director can be considered as a duly authorized representative of the commissioner. Now, certain variations can take place. If it's the regional director and the regional director denies your protest, can you appeal to the CTA directly? The answer is yes, because the regional director is a duly authorized representative. Now, another possibility. If it's decided by the regional director, which is a duly authorized representative, and you do not wish to appeal to the CTA, is there any other option? Meron pa. The option is you can have an administrative appeal to the commissioner. Posible yan. Administrative appeal to the Commissioner of Internal Revenue. That's also a possible remedy. But here is the thing. what if the regional director fails to act within 180 days? The regional director fails to act within 180 days. Can the taxpayer treat that as implied denial and appeal to the CTA? The answer is yes. Okay, the taxpayer can treat that as implied denial and appeal to the CTA within 30 days after the expiration of the 180-day period. After all, the regional director is a duly authorized representative. But can the taxpayer administratively appeal the inaction of the regional director? Ito, may solution tayo dyan, nakaprovide na rin dito. There is no administrative appeal of inaction by the CIR's duly authorized representative. So if the regional director fails to act within 180 days, the option by the taxpayer is to treat that as implied denial, appeal to the CTA, or await the final decision of the commissioner's duly authorized representative. Okay? Yan. All arising from relevant regulations. Now, to ensure an up-to-date approach in the discussion, 2020 jurisprudence was used in answering previous bar question. So, problem that we have here, no? On May 15, 2009, Lamanga Trading Corporation received a deficiency business tax assessment of 1.5 million from the treasurer of Pasay City. On June 30, 2009, the corporation contested the assessment by filing a protest. Please take note of the days. For those who are preparing for the bar, my suggestion is this. If the problem involves exact dates and it is a problem dealing with remedies, be very, 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 very mindful of the dates. Okay? Because those are important. On October 10, 2009, the corporation received a collection letter from the treasurer, okay, causing it to file on October 25, 2009, an appeal against the assessment before the regional trial court. Two questions asked in the 2010 bar. Was the protest timely filed? Was the appeal with the Pasay RTC filed on time? Okay? No problem with the first one. All that we have to do is apply the local government code. Section 195 of the local government code gives the taxpayer 60 days from receipt of the assessment to protest. In this case, okay, from May 15, 2009 to June 30, 2009, only 46 days had lapsed. So it's well within the 60-day period. Madali yung una kasi it's just an application of the local government code. Okay. Second one, the appeal was not filed on time. Okay. Why? Section 195 of the local government code provides that when an assessment is protested, the treasurer has 60 days within which to decide. Okay. Taxpayer has 30 days from receipt of the denial or from the lapse of the 60-day period to decide within which to appeal. Okay. Anong nangyari dito? Since no decision on the protest was made, the taxpayer should have appealed to the RTC within 30 days from the lapse of the period to decide or until September 28, 2009. Because the appeal was filed on October 25, it is already time barred. Okay, that's the suggested answer. But my point in presenting to you this problem is this. It's a 2010 bar examination question, but if you will notice, the suggested answer was taken from a 2020 decision, and it was a decision of the Court of Tax Appeals and Bank. Why? Because the approach of the book is that in the absence of Supreme Court decisions, CTA decisions were used. Okay? CTA decisions were used. And the CTA decision is exactly on this particular score. Okay? That's why this was presented in this manner. Okay. The book also presents an interplay between the provisions of the local government code and the law creating the Court of Tax Appeals, which is Republic Act 9282. For example, in this particular problem, which court has jurisdiction to hear and decide local tax cases? Tax collection cases involving final and executory assessments for local taxes, fees, charges, and penalties, where the principal amount of taxes, fees, exclusive of charges and penalties is at least 1 million pesos, should be filed directly with the CTA division. Why? Because the law does not qualify what type of tax collection cases are involved for purposes of invoking the jurisdiction of the CTA. Remember that the Court of Tax Appeals has jurisdiction over tax collection cases where the amount involved is at least 1 million pesos. And the law does not seem to make any distinction as to what kind of tax is involved. Okay? That's why this is an example of applying the local government code as well as the provisions of the law creating the CTA, presented clearly in this manner. Okay? And then on the last chapter of the book, which is real property taxation, by the way, if you take a look at the book itself, there are several recent cases decided by the court on real property taxation. No? Dumadami yan. Mind you, there are many decisions of recent vintage. Probably if you take a look at the last 5 or 10 years, there are many decisions of the Supreme Court dealing with real property taxation, which are very relevant. I urge you to take a look at those cases because I see them as potential bar zones. But for purposes of our discussion as of the present, I chose this topic, no, the determination of real property tax, because in some discussions or illustrations, they are presented for purposes of easy comprehension. Parang ganito, meron nang nakalagay na formula. Bakit? Kasi mas madali, no? How do you know the liability for real property tax? Get the market value of a property. Okay, get the market value of a property, multiply it by the assessment level depending on how the property is used. Residential, agricultural, commercial, industrial, mineral, timberland, special, no? That's how you get the assessed value of a property. Okay? From the assessed value of the property, multiply it by the allowable real property tax rate, you get the real property tax. So, nandyan, easy to follow, easy to understand. You can easily comprehend how to determine the liability for real property tax. So later on, if you are asked in an essay type question, ano na nga ba yun? Paano na nga ba malalaman ang real property tax? Just imagine this particular formula that's presented. You already have the solution in your hands. Okay? Yan. Another item of note, may the taxpayer, instead of appealing to the CBAA, file a motion for reconsideration before the local board of assessment appeals. Okay. It's an item that was asked, again, applying a relatively recent case decided by the Supreme Court. Okay. Okay. So as I mentioned to you, no, the approach in the book is that it asks or it presents to you several discussions by the Supreme Court. Okay. Sorry, I'm having some issues here, but at least we are down to the final set of our slides. No? Before I end this presentation, allow me to share with you this. I tell this to my students and the students who are reviewing with me time in and time out, year in, year out. Ito yung sinabi ni Einstein, the hardest thing to understand in this world is income tax. Right? The hardest thing in the world to understand is the income tax. Einstein, one of the greatest minds, a genius, he said that the hardest thing in the world to understand is income tax. And I've been telling to my students, you know, my dream is after you have learned tax, and now my dream is after you have read the book, I hope one day you can face Einstein. Sorry, you can face Einstein not in the near future, Matagal pa naman sana, no? But you can face him and tell him, Einstein, you are wrong. The hardest thing to understand in the world is not income tax. It's value-added tax. Okay, with that, I end my presentation. Hopefully, I was able to share with you some of the snippets in this particular book, Taxation Law Reviewer. For those who haven't gotten a copy of their book, it's available, of course, in all our Rex Bookstore branches. So thank you very much to all of you, to all those who have attended, and to all those who spared their time. Maraming salamat po. Agyamanak, Apo. Thank you.
Thank you for that very rich presentation, Attorney Barlis. We are very honored to receive such expert guidance, especially at a time when the study and practice of law have become more challenging. In behalf of Rex Education, allow me to congratulate you on yet another feather in your cap with the release of this book. We look forward to learning more from you through your books and lectures. Congratulations, Attorney Barlis, and here's to more years of working together as stewards of legal education. All right, and to tell us more about what makes the book an expert guide and a resource in the study of law, let us hear a message from Dean Joanne S. Largo, Office of the Vice President, Academic Affairs, University of San Carlos, Downtown, Campus, Cebu City.
Thank you very much. Dean Jason, allow us to congratulate you for this work. Taxation law as a study and as a practice had always been considered by many as a niche area because while tax touches everyone from birth to death, few understand how it works and even fewer have gained mastery of all its intricacies. I am just here beaming with pride, Dean, that you belong to the few good men and women who do not only understand but have in fact mastered the craft. So the book has all the ingredients of a good reviewer, updated in terms of BIR issuances and Supreme Court decided cases, comprehensive because it covers the settled and deals with the unsettled, meaning to say the gray areas of the law, but it has that one great edge that comes from the kind of person and educator that Dean Jason Barlis is. So, but before I expound on this one defining characteristic of the book, let me share to you a story. When I was given the privilege to be part of the Philippine Association of Law Schools, or PALS, it was just my sheer luck that Dean Jason was also with the Board of Trustees at the same time. Now, there was this unwritten pact of PALS with the bar chairman of a given bar exam year that the bar chair would coordinate with PALS on significant matters involving the bar examination. Matters like bar coverage, what needs to be excluded, what is the cutoff period of Supreme Court decisions to be included in the examination, things like that. But Dean Jason took the discourse further. In his typical methodical fashion, he made a time and motion study of how long it would typically take a bar examiner to check each essay question. His analysis yielded to the conclusion that if the High Court would still like the bar examiner to be able to read the answers and finish checking about 6,000 notebooks in 3 months, without rest, then the questions should just be around 25 or 20 or 30, including sub-questions. That, it seems, was taken to heart by the bar chairpersons like Justice Brion, C.J. Peralta, C.J. Luke, Justice Bernabe, and I'm sure now by Justice Leonen. Now, that to us speaks of few important things. First, that Dean Jason is thorough, precise, and methodical. He will not permit error in his work. He will aim for precision. And second, he keeps the learners in mind, always and at all times. In his work, the center, the core, the heart, the soul is always the welfare of the learners. And so this book in Taxation Law Review is reliable because it comes from him. He is precise. And this book is very learner-centered. Not only because it comes in question and answer format, but it does, but mostly because Dean Jason knows that as adult learners, we learn best when we see the actual application of the legal concepts to real life situations. We retain what we know when we see its application in our experiences. And so this book presents the principle in a very simple manner, which in itself is a feat, but then proceeds to illustrate this application in real life scenarios. This is very much adult learning approach. This is very much Dean Jason Barlis. So, as taxation law has often been viewed by many to be very off-putting owing to its highly specialized nature, this book is a breath of fresh air. Or should I say, of pine-scented Baguio morning fresh air. Because this book departs from the verbose legalese that has intimidated many law students in their study of the subject. So I thank God for you, Dean. Because of you, our law students will be reviewing tax law in a less stressful manner. And this is very timely, what with COVID-19 being a daily stressor in our lives. By being you, you have made things better. You made the load lighter. So salamat from the bottom of our hearts and congratulations, Dean.
Thank you very much, Dean Largo. And now we are very honored to be joined by another legal expert who can best guide us on how we can use the book for an optimum learning, especially for the upcoming bar examinations. Let us all give a warm welcome to Commissioner Josefe C. Sorrera T., Commissioner of Legal Education Board.
Good afternoon, everyone, or should I say good evening, good early evening. Congratulations, Dean Jason. I was listening and you really did a good job, an excellent job. In fact, I learned a lot from your sharing this afternoon. I concur with VP Joanne's testimony. I have not written any book, only pleadings and academic papers, unlike Dean Joanne, VP Joanne, and Dean Jason. My experience in writing has impressed upon me the need for generosity on the part of the writer. Writing is not easy. To come up with an excellent written material, one must have a big heart for the subject matter. Today, we are celebrating the generosity of the former Vice President and Dean Jason Barlis. Dean Jason has given his heart in writing the Taxation Law Reviewer. Indeed, Einstein was right. Taxation is a very hard subject and harder to write about. And you have seen a while ago, Dean Jason has shared to you his journey in writing this reviewer to ensure that this reviewer will not just facilitate learning, especially for the bar examinees or our bar hopefuls. It will also facilitate teaching for us who teach taxation. He went an extra mile. Imagine, create is just new, but he has made it. He ensured that create will already be part of his reviewer because this will surely be asked. Maybe not this bar exam, but in the future. The way he presented create, he presented in a way that would make it understandable, with a lot of things in our mind, and with taxation as a very hard subject, an additional subject matter added to already a full plate is really burdensome. But Dean Jason updated the book, updated our learning by including the recent development in taxation. So this is really, for me, what is so important with this book. He made sure that you, their reviewers will be updated. I have been a taxation teacher in accountancy and in law. It is a difficult subject to teach, that you need a good or an excellent book to guide. For us teachers in taxation, this taxation law reviewer will help us because the way that Dean Jason has arranged the subject matter will also guide us tax teachers on how we're going to present the lesson to our students. It will also guide us the technique. Dean Jason is already teaching in that book. Dean Jason's technique, we can learn from Dean Jason's technique. That the law faculty here who are teaching taxation, we can learn from the technique of Dean Jason, which is evident in that book, in the Taxation Law Reviewer he wrote. And so Dean Jason will not just be helping our bar examinees, our bar reviewees, but also the bar reviewers as well as the taxation law faculty. Although your book will not lighten the burden of taxation, Dean Jason, taxation is still burdensome, but Dean, your book will lighten the burden of teaching and understanding taxation law. It is written in your book, Dean Jason, that taxation is the lifeblood of the government. For without taxes, the government can neither exist nor endure. Just like taxation, a well-written book is the lifeblood of the educational system. For without a well-written book, teaching and learning can neither exist nor endure. So, Dean Jason, thank you for this beautiful and work of your heart. I know this came from your heart. Thank you for this because I know this will really help our bar examinees, our bar hopefuls, and also help all of us teachers of taxation law. Thank you for your generosity and again, congratulations.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Sorrera T. At this point, we will now be hearing more about how the works of Attorney Jason R. Barlis helped pave the way for some of the most remarkable young lawyers today. Let us all give a warm welcome to Judge Lilibeth T. Sindayin Libiran, former Dean of St. Louis University in Baguio, presiding judge of RTC Branch 61, Baguio City.
Good day. Taxation law is so appropriately named because it is, for common people like us, taxing. It is a dreaded subject in law school because of its complexity. Consider, for instance, the Marshall and Holmes divergence. The power to tax is the power to destroy, versus the power to tax is not the power to destroy while this court sits. So, which one is it? Or is it both? Then, as if it is not enough that it covers an overwhelmingly vast statutory foundation, it requires you to do math. I am honored to make a testimonial of the book Taxation Law Reviewer by Attorney Jason R. Barlis. Sir Jason is an excellent professor of taxation law. Aristotle once said that those who know do, and those that understand teach. You get the best of both worlds because Attorney Barlis not only has an active practice in tax law, being a CPA lawyer, but also because he has been teaching and making countless candidates for the bar understand the difficult subject. I have forgotten most concepts about tax. I think I did a minute after completing the bar examination in taxation law. But as I read through the Taxation Law Reviewer, I felt an air of excitement, like I wanted to learn taxation again. As a former dean of the School of Law of St. Louis University, I have gotten a multitude of feedbacks from students, and I am convinced that the best teachers are the ones who can explain in the simplest terms the most complex concepts of law. Attorney Barlis has done just that in his book.
Thank you for all these kind words, Dean Joanne Largo, Commissioner Josefe Sorrera T., and Judge Lilibet Livira. Hearing your praises of the book gives us utmost pride for having been chosen and entrusted with the publication of this masterpiece. In the same vein, allow us to express our gratitude to you as well for being stewards of legal education and of law practice yourselves. All right, this time, as promised, we will now be giving away a copy of this new book. Who will be the lucky one to win the book Taxation Law Reviewer by our beloved Rex author, attorney Jason R. Barlis? Again, reminder, we will be announcing the name of the lucky person for this raffle wheel. If your name is called, please comment down present so we know you're here with us. We will then verify if it's you who won. However, if after 30 seconds we did not see any comment, we will be drawing another winner from our list of registrants. Good luck! Congratulations to McCoy Locson. Once again, congratulations to McCoy Locson. If you're here with us today, Sir McCoy, please comment present in the comment section. We will be giving you 30 seconds. All right. Unfortunately, Sir Mikoy was unable to comment present in the comment section within the allotted time. So our Rex representative will draw another winner. All right. Let's spin the wheel, please. Domalanta. Once again, congratulations to Marian Domalanta. Ms. Marian, if you're here with us today, kindly comment present in the comment section below so we can verify if it's you. We will be giving you 30 seconds only to comment. All right, congratulations once again to Ms. Marian Domalanta. You have won a copy of attorney Jason R. Barlis' new book entitled Taxation Law Reviewer. So a Rex representative will be sending you an email regarding the details on how to claim your prize. Once again, congratulations to Ms. Marian Domalanta. All right, at this point, we will now listen to Rex Education's General Manager for CLV Law, Mr. Reginald Soriano, for his word of thanks.
Pleasant good evening to everybody, to our distinguished guests, Judge Libiran, Commissioner Sorority, Dean Jo and Largo, distinguished guests, faculties, law learners. First and foremost, in behalf of the Rex family, we hope that everybody is staying safe and sound, especially during these challenging times. We know that we are now in another stage wherein we're trying to overcome certain challenges. So, our heartfelt wish that everybody stay safe, keep healthy, and away from all these challenges that we're facing. Together as one nation, I'm sure we can navigate through this. And actually, it's because of this that we are changing a lot of the things that we're doing right now. So it brings to mind one of the few things that I've also remembered with regard to the topic that's being written and being discussed by our esteemed author, Dean Jason Barlis. Dean, Dean Jason, first and foremost, from the Rex family, we are so proud and happy that you're part of this family po. Maraming salamat. I am so happy that I'm here to be able to be part of this great activity, this great event, wherein together we're helping the journey of our law learners, our law practitioners be better at what they do in both understanding and sharing that understanding and helping the nation as it grows in the taxes, especially in taxation. You see, I've been realizing that when I went back and studied some of the things that I've been in the history, I was reminded that there's a famous line that in this world nothing is certain except death and taxes. For everybody's perspective, that saying was actually based on the fact that Benjamin Franklin wrote that to a French person when he was talking about how they have already established the U.S. Constitution, how they already established a great new nation like the United States of America. So, what does that mean for us? No, it means that nations, everything else that can happen, are actually built on the social contract that we establish the relationship between one another. And taxation is mentioned also by Commissioner Sorority, is that social contract between us and taxation. So I think it's very, very important that we in Rex understand how we can be partners and enable our law learners in their journey. So again, this great important event puts a milestone for us wherein we're able to help reach out, provide the right solutions, and more importantly, address the needs of our law learners and our law practitioners. And for that, we are so grateful and thankful. So expect that we will continue to partner with our great authors, with our great family. And again, in behalf of the Rex family, as I say that you stay safe and sound and healthy, uh, we would like to extend our sincerest congratulations to Dean Jason Barlis. Dean, maraming salamat po and congratulations. We are so happy for your continued success and we pray that everybody gets to benefit from this great work that you do, your heart's work as you poured it into this book. Maraming salamat po. God bless to everyone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reginald Soriano. On that note, we have come to the end of this afternoon's program. Indeed, it was a very productive learning afternoon with our luminaries, Attorney Jason R. Barlis, and our distinguished guests. On behalf of Rex Education, I would like to express our heartfelt gratitude for having been chosen as your partner in legal education. We look forward to more years of our fruitful partnership as we continue to work together to enable law students and lawyers achieve their dreams of becoming lawyers and excelling as one. To everyone who joined us this afternoon, thank you for learning with us and for choosing Rex to be your partner in learning. See you all on our next book launch and lecture. Thank you and keep soaring, Edu Campions.
Thank you po. Thank you.
Congrats again, Dean.